So today we're going to do something a little bit different here on the channel. I'm going to be reacting to some comments that I got on some videos that I did about drug addiction. For those of you that are new to my channel, I first shared my stories of addiction last year, and it was mainly when I saw how the right wing was using Hunter Biden's drug addiction to demonize him. That just really triggered something in me and made me want to speak up about it. And in talking about them demonizing Hunter Biden and dragging his past up in his face every chance they get, I ended up talking about my own story. And when I did, I had so many people reach out to me with positive comments and messages and share their stories. And once I really started talking about it, I started to feel better about talking about it. I found it not only therapeutic, for myself, but I realized that I was helping a whole lot of people by talking about it. And so that's something I want to do here on the channel, is I want to use the platform for the greater good. And I figured today we would read some comments that I've been getting. But before we do, for those of you that are new to this, I did want to share my story another time because it bears repeating. For the longest time, the main reason why I would not talk about my addiction is because I didn't feel like I had a good excuse to be an addict. And what I mean by that is I was raised up by two very loving, supporting parents. I was never neglected, was never abused, never talked down to. I had nothing in this world to rebel against. I had a good childhood, a good life. I really did. I mean, we struggled. We were poor here in Appalachia, but we didn't know we were poor. We had no idea. At least I didn't growing up. It was years later that I began to realize, wow, we really were poor, but I didn't know it at the time. And so I had a good childhood. I had a fun childhood. And later on, I started playing music and I became a singer-songwriter. And when I did, I wanted to be able to say that I lived my songs. And I'm heavily influenced by Hunter S. Thompson, who's hanging back there over my shoulder. And I was a big believer in gonzo journalism. I was a big believer in buy the ticket, take the ride. And I really got caught up in that mindset that, okay, if I'm going to write these songs, if I'm going to write about cocaine, well, I better do it and see what it's like. And if I'm going to write about, drugs and alcohol, I better try every one that I can. And for the longest time, I was kind of like the old Sheryl Crow song where she says, I dropped acid on a Saturday night just to see what the fuss was about. For the longest time, that was me. I just tried random things to see what the fuss was about and to see what the experience was like. And for the longest time, I was just the fun-loving drunk who went out to his shows, played music, got up and sang songs, drank a lot of beer, and entertained the crowd. But as time went on, I began drinking heavier and heavier and heavier. And when you're in those kind of places, when you're in dive bars drinking to a rowdy bunch of redneck people, they will cheer you on and they will tell you to keep drinking, And pretty soon, I was drinking so much that I didn't have the strength to get on stage the next night. There was times that my band would literally drive me to the show and I would be asleep in the truck on the way to the show. I'm asleep in the van and they would wake me up and I would get ready in time to walk on stage. And the first time I had walked out at all was on stage to play music. And so that went on for a long time. And I wrote a lot of songs about some of the drugs that I'd experimented with. And one of the songs that I wrote with a good friend of mine, it had a punchline in it that said she was writing bad checks for Lorcets and drinking $3 wine. And that song became such a hit in these dive bars that people started handing me pills when I walked off stage. And they would say, here you go, sing that song that you wrote. And so I didn't take them when they would give them to me because I didn't know what they were. And at the time, I had a bandmate who had a really bad problem, and I didn't want to give them to him, so I just ended up taking them home and saving them and collecting them. And one day, I told a bandmate about that, a different bandmate. I was like, I got this stuff, and I don't know even what to do with it. I'm probably just going to throw it away. He's like, well, don't throw it away. I can tell you exactly what it is. And so he pulls out a Percocet 10, and he's like, hey, man, he's like, you see this thing? He's like, if you take this, he said, you'll have no problem getting on stage tonight. And I was like, that don't make any sense to me, man. I was like, I thought people just took pain pills when they were in pain. He's like, no, man. He's like, they will give you energy like you wouldn't believe. And sure enough, it worked. And I felt like Superman on stage. And then, those things escalated until pretty soon I had to have something to bring me down. So it would be Percocets, Lorcets, whatever I could get my hands on to bring me up. And then it would be Xanaxes and Valiums and Klonopin or whatever to bring me down. And that was a vicious cycle for a whole long time until one day I slammed right straight into the wall, realized I had a problem, because for the longest time, for years, and I'll talk more about this in other videos, but for years, if you'd asked me if I was a drug addict, I would say no. I'm just a functioning musician. I just do this while I'm on the job playing music. And after I went through all those battles with it, one of the reasons why I didn't share my story was I just kind of felt stupid, to be honest. It was like, here I've been this entire time. I did this just to try to be like Hank Williams Sr. I did this just to try to be like Hunter Thompson. I was just trying to, because I wanted, if I wrote a song, I wanted it to be because I lived it. That really meant something to me, to be able to say I lived that song and I was the asshole in that song. And, I just kind of felt weird talking about it from that angle, because I would hear other people's stories about how they were treated growing up, and I would think to myself, well, my story really don't compare to that. But once I started talking about it, I began realizing that it did help people. And I just wanted to take a minute here and respond to some of these comments. So we're going to start off. This comment come from their initials are MJW, and they say this. Amen, brother. I was an alcoholic for 20 years and was even a substance abuse counselor during that period. I've been sober since August of 2010 and still grow through cravings, some stronger than others. My friends and family have been there for me through it all, and I credit them with keeping me from relapsing all these years, even through the darkness of the traitor Trump regime. Well, I can very much relate to that, and thank you so much for the comment. One thing that I would say to anybody that's trying to fully kick addiction is, and this is going to be hard to hear, you have to cut that crowd out of your life, and you have to get a good support system around you of family and friends that care about you and want to see you succeed. Because if you try to hang around that old crowd and go back into it and say, oh, I got this, it never works. And that's one of the things that I really learned the hard way. I had to figure that out the hard way. I fell off the wagon, I don't know how many times, because I would say, oh, I've got this. I would go to a bar and I'd say, okay, tonight I'm going to play it sober. I'm not going to drink. I might just sip one or two during my sets, but I'm not going to get drunk. I'm going to make it. I'm not going to do anything. But eventually, I would catch myself right back in that same boat. And there's an old saying, it's one of my favorite old sayings, but it rings true. If you sit in a barbershop long enough, you'll get a haircut. And it's the same way. If you're around that crowd long enough, you will get sucked right back into it. So, you may have some really good friends and you may have a significant other that you love a whole lot, but if they're going to drag you into that world, then you have to cut them out and you have to cut them off. So to that commenter, I say I'm glad you got some good family around you to support you, and thanks for that comment. Now the next one here comes from Gay McCullough, who says, that is so true about the cravings. A lot of people do not believe addiction is a disease, but a moral issue. I'm a recovering addict whose integrity has been restored one day at a time. Again, thank you for that comment. And yeah, the cravings never go away. And that's something that I really didn't understand when I first started on the road to recovery. I didn't realize that the cravings was going to stick around, because so many people says, oh, it's just a choice, man. It's not a disease. It's just a choice. Well, you may have decided to do it the first time, but after that, it's something that's inside you that's not as easy to shake as people may think. And my biggest problem for me personally, the thing that I crave, I was able to kick the uppers. I was able to kick the Percocets and all those things and all the uppers. For me, and I'll still have a drink from time to time. But the hardest part for me to kick was the Xanaxes. That was the hardest part. And I'll tell you why. Because when I would wake up in the morning with just a pounding, throbbing headache, I would reach over and take a Xanax or two and mellow back out and sleep for a couple more hours. And it would just feel great. I would just be relaxed, And I did that for years. And so, you go from that, and then one day you're not doing that anymore. Even when I've woke up sick, just maybe having the flu or having a bad head cold, or maybe I woke up too early, maybe you had your clock set and you woke up 2 hours early, like, man, I really need to go back to sleep for a few more hours, or man, I really need to get a little bit more rest, or man, my head's hurting, or whatever the case may be. Right there is where I've had my hardest time shaking the cravings for Xanaxes, because they would always mellow me back out. And, that's the hardest one for me to get rid of the craving. Every now and then, I'll be really tired and really down and out, and I'll get the craving for something to bring me up. But I can say that and Xanaxes was the hardest thing to finally break away from for me. So now we're going to go on to this comment here. This one here comes from Barbara. And she says, for someone like me that doesn't have an addiction to alcohol, to turn down a drink is nothing. For someone that is addicted, it takes a tremendous amount of willpower and determination on a day-to-day basis. The focus and mindfulness is something is something to be proud of. I respect Hunter Biden. I really appreciate that comment, and I appreciate someone who's not an addict realizing what it is and realizing that it does take a whole lot of willpower. I think it's very important for people who, if you have an addict in your family, try not to be judgmental, try not to come down hard on them, try to be understanding like that commenter was. You know, it's easy for you, but it's not easy for everybody. And another thing, while we're on the topic of cravings, that I've actually done and it's helped is when I get, and like I said, I'll still have a drink from time to time. And sometimes I can go out with my buddies and I can have a few beers with my pizza and I come home and I'm fine. But when I have those really hard cravings to pull a good drunk, I will just take out a bottle of water and chug it as fast as I can, as though I was drinking a beer. And I may chug 2 waters as fast as I can, or I may just reach in the cabinet and take some over-the-counter Tylenol, just to help with that physical craving. Because another thing, a friend of mine not too long ago gave me a non-alcoholic beer. And I started drinking that non-alcoholic beer. And as I drank it, I kind of noticed I was starting to almost feel a buzz. My words started maybe getting a little bit slurry. And I was like, this is weird. And I do believe, I'm not too educated on this, but I believe there is a whole lot of muscle memory there. And so, a lot of times when you're just really dying to get that drink, you just want something to go down fast, to relieve that tension. And so I've just, that's something I've done to help with the cravings. I'm not sure it would help everybody. I'm not a doctor. Don't take your medical advice from me. I don't want to be Joe Rogan here giving everybody medical advice, but that's just something that I've done to help with those cravings and it's worked for me is, just chugging a glass of water if I have to feel that physical craving. Now this comment here comes from Juliet. She says, and thank you. It's not just those who struggle with addiction. It's their families and friends who suffer. Not everyone manages to pull through, and kicking someone who is down has clawed their way up is cruel. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not judged to fit anyone. Is not fit to judge anyone. I apologize for that. That's so true. The families are who really suffers the most. Because they see what you're going through and they're just trying to help. And, it's hard, all the stuff that they get put through. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're the ones really taking the real shot of it and they're trying to understand it. And that's why I say it's just very important for everybody to be understanding and not be, judgmental about it. But thank you to Juliet for that comment. And the last comment here will come from, I believe I'm saying this right, Bevity, who says, you don't honestly think those horrible people don't want Hunter to relapse? They want to destroy him in every way they can. And I'm going to close on that comment there because, yes, I absolutely do believe that the right wing would love to see Hunter relapse so they could have a story out of it. And that is what is so sick and depraved about these people. In any other era, in any other generation, just the fact that they've used Hunter's addiction against him would be a deal breaker for people. But it's not these days because they're so hell-bent on wanting to win. They're so hell-bent on wanting to distract from everything that Donald Trump has done that they are taking a man's drug addiction and trying to make that into a story. And if Hunter Biden fell off the wagon tomorrow and had some big escapade, they would eat it up and enjoy it. And I just think that is sick and depraved. And I think it's sick when people mocks and makes fun of addicts and finds ways to laugh at them. Folks, it's no joke. And seeing people treat Hunter Biden the way they did is what drove me to doing these kind of videos and what drove me to finally talking about it. And like I said at the start of the video, once I started talking about it, I felt a lot better about it. And so to anyone out there struggling, feel free to reach out to me. I talk to as many people as I can. My inbox is pretty full these days, but I do try to get to as many messages as I can and reply and talk to people. Just remember, there's a whole lot of people that's been through it too. You're not the first person that's ever been through it, and you won't be the last. but you can make a difference. You can talk to other people and help them get through, and just sharing your story. I remember too back when people used to say, share your story. Like I don't want to talk about it because it's hard to talk about, and there's a lot of darkness in those stories, and it's okay. I've just started to scrape the tip of the iceberg of the darkness that I've endured in my life, and we'll get to that later. But always be there for your family that's going through it, and if you're going through it, be there for your family and listen to them because they're only trying to help. So, folks, thank you so much for the comments and the kind messages, and you guys just keep trying to kick it, okay?